Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk about a couple of interviews that Geeta Gopinath, the first deputy managing director of the International Monetary Fund, she's probably the number two person doing research and making economic policy from IMF. Former to that, she was a professor at Harvard University, and before that at the University of Chicago. She's originally from Delhi. So she gave two interviews, one to India Today that I saw with Rahul Kanwal, and then she gave one with Barkha Dutt. And so basically, I'm reflecting on the things that she talked about, some of the questions that she answered, and some of the questions that she chose not to answer. They're very interesting. And she's in Delhi to celebrate the 75th anniversary of her alma mater, the Delhi School of Economics. So that's what we're going to talk about. The questions really are that she has been predicting that India is going to become the third biggest economy by 2027. IMF has raised its estimate of India's growth from 6.5 to 7% per annum, which is great news. And she also talked uh, India becoming a developed economy by 2047, which is the goal of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But before we do all of that, don't forget to subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and do share this video with your socio-political network. So Geeta Gopinath, I found her interviews very interesting. She's a brilliant person, a brilliant economist, and also communicates very well. The topic that she was basically addressing, I actually did a conversation on that a few weeks ago, asking the question, can India escape the middle income trap? And that's exactly what they were talking about or around that topic. And I've also in the past reviewed one of her lectures that she gave at Stanford about the impact of geopolitics on the global economy. So in that sense, because she's from India and because she's such a prominent economist, I do follow her quite a bit. So first, some of the good news. The good news is that even though the Indian government itself predicts that India will grow at a rate of 6.5%, IMF has upgraded its prediction of India's growth rate to 7%. So India is expected to grow at 7%, which means that Geeta Gopinath is predicting that India will become the third biggest economy, which means it will surpass Germany and Japan by 2027, and it'll be third only to the United States and China. For those of you who watch Conversations regularly, you will probably know that I have also made similar predictions several times in the last 2 years. That India will reach the status of the third biggest economy by 2027. Most people were predicting it to be 2029, but because the growth rate last year were much better than expected. If you remember the last 2 quarters, India was growing at 8.2%. And so India is moving faster in terms of growth of GDP. The reasons that Geeta Gopinath attributes to this is that she feels that the monsoons have been very good this year, which means that because the monsoons are good, the crops will be good, and because the crops will be good, the rural income will be much higher, and because rural income will be better, there will be more rural consumption. She's already seen signs of private and rural consumption going up in India, and one of the indicators that apparently IMF uses is sale of two-wheelers or motorbikes, and apparently the sale of motorbikes is going up in India, and so she sees that as a very good sign that private consumption is beginning to increase, especially in the rural area, which is very important because, as you know, that the only sector where there is more job creation right now is in the rural sector. People are leaving the cities and going back to the villages to work on their farms. That itself is complicated because it may not be a full-time job, but nevertheless, the fact that there are more people in the villages now than there were 2 years ago, and that they have more money to spend will be good news. So one sign is that the reason why IMF has raised its estimate of India's growth rate from 6.5 to 7% is better monsoons. Number two is obviously the increase in private consumption. So she's seeing private consumption across the board, not just in the rural areas. And she also says that one of the reasons why The third reason that she gave is better than expected performance in the last year. So the momentum that Indian economy gained last year will carry over into the next 2-3 years, propelling India to become the third biggest economy by 2047. So this was her main message. Wherever she went, she was making this point. But then, surprisingly, Rahul Kanwal of India Today did ask her twice, and he tried to ask the same question twice. And I'll show you both the questions and her answers to it. The first question he asked her was that given the current policies, the policies of the government at the moment, is India going to become a developed country by 2047? Now, in order to understand what is a developed country, you must understand how the World Bank classifies economies. According to the World Bank, there are 4 tiers. So there is a low-income economy, a lower middle-income economy, a higher middle-income economy, and a high-income economy. So India and the categories are that I think it is less than $1,100 if the per capita GDP is less than $1,100, you're a low-income economy, and then from $1,100 to about $4,500 is lower middle income, and if the per capita GDP is over $4,500, then you are an upper middle income economy, and if your GDP is more than $11,500, then you are a higher income economy. So when Rahul Kanwal is asking Gita Gopinath, and if India is going to be a developed economy or a high-income economy by 2047, that's exactly what he's asking. And remember, in 2047, the benchmark by World Bank would be probably close to $12,000, not 11.5 or 11.4, whatever it is right now. Now, I will show that to you in a chart. So you're seeing that as we speak, the exact number. So it was interesting. She dodged that answer.
On the back of the policies that you're seeing at play and the growth trajectory that you're seeing in front of you on the horizon, do you think India is on path currently to be an advanced economy by 2047?
So firstly, again, I just want to emphasize that India is doing extremely well in terms of its growth rate. At 7%, it is the fastest growing major economy in the world. And being able to keep that up, which is what we expect it will do, 6.5%, I mean, that is a large accomplishment. Now, 2047 is a very long ways out. I think we can look at some intermediate targets along the way. We expect by 2027, India could be the third largest economy in the world based on our growth projections.
27, not 28 or 29.
Based on our current projections, 2027 is when we expect that could happen. But what happens all the way in another, several more years later, of course, that's a long run. Now, we have to keep in mind that most middle-income countries have not graduated into advanced economy status, the so-called middle-income trap, where that doesn't happen. But it's the countries that keep up with persistent structural reforms on multiple fronts and graduating not just from at some point where it is more of using techniques that exist to moving to being more innovation-driven economies, making that transition happen to. It takes all of that to get to being an advanced economy. There are small exceptions like South Korea and Singapore that have accomplished that. India can certainly, work towards that goal, but it's going to require a huge movement on multiple fronts.
She dodged it, and so watch what she had to say. So basically what she's saying is that India is doing fantastic, India is growing much better, India is a bright spot in the global economy. She threw a statistic which was quite stunning. She said that India is contributing 17% of the global growth, which basically tells you the world is really not growing. So among the G20 countries and among the developed economies, India is the only bright spot. So that's why World Bank and IMF are so thrilled with India, because while all the bigger economies are not doing well, except the United States, which is around 2%, 2.5%, whereas you have Germany faltering, you have Japan faltering, Britain, etc. All of these are growing at less than 1%. So while all the major G7 economies are not really growing, except China, which is not part of G7, which is growing at about 4%, India is doing stunningly well, which is at 7%. So she talks about that and keeps repeating the fact that India will become the third biggest economy by 2047, but she does by 2027, but she does not say yes or no to the question of whether India will become a developed economy in 2047. She says we need to do all of these things which we need to do. So Rahul Kanwal tries again by asking her, is there a chance that India will get caught up in the middle income trap?
How concerned are you about this possibility that, okay, you're talking about an advanced economy, but the very real fear is that you could just get stuck, like a lot of other countries, in the middle income trap?
Firstly, I think if India can keep up growth at 7-8% for the next decade, let's set aside the question of whether that gets you to advanced economy status or not, but that itself would be a big accomplishment. So, everything along the way matters as much as getting to an advanced economy status. If you can get to an upper middle income country status.
Now, if you really want to understand what that question means, you have to go back and take a look at my conversation where I asked this question: will India escape the middle income trap? I will post a card at the end, so when you come to the end of this video, you will see a link to that conversation where I've explained in some detail as to what is a middle income trap. So basically what happens is the World Bank says you have to have 3 steps. When you're a low income economy, you invest, and that's how you grow. And then you become a middle income economy. You invest basically in infrastructure. You build roads, you build buildings, you build factories, you build stuff. And that generates a higher GDP, and it raises the quality of life. And so the per capita exceeds $1,100 per annum, and you become a middle income economy. But then there are 2 stages. So if you are a low income economy, you go to a lower middle income, and then you go to upper middle income, and then you go to the higher income. So in the middle, the strategy is of infusion. So what you do is you look around the world and say, okay, now I have an infrastructure, what do? You look at all the innovations that other countries are making, and then you adopt those innovations, and you try to implement those innovations in your country and in your economy. And so that is called infusion. So she does not even confirm whether India is at that stage. She's talking that India is being innovative. So India now has to go from being a lower middle income, because India's GDP is only $2,700, and then it has to become an upper middle income economy, and then it will become a higher income. And so it has to take 2 steps. And so the first step will be through infusion, and the next step will be through innovation. So the economy will have to innovate. Now you stop looking at other countries and say, how can I do better than other countries? How can I do the same things, but better than Japan, better than Germany, better than France, UK, and the United States, better than China? So that step, it is very clear that she's not saying it directly, because I guess she's worried about being trolled, but she's saying that India needs to be continuously reforming, and there has to be structural reforms ongoing all the time. And it is very clear that that is not happening. So that is the point that she's trying to make. So Rahul then asks her, will India escape the middle income trap? And then she just says that India needs to continue to grow at this level. That is great. And countries which consistently grow will eventually lead. There are very few examples, really. South Korea is one of those examples. Chile is another example. There are very few countries which have really, apparently only 30 or 34 countries have become high-income economies. And many, nearly 100 or so other countries are caught up in the middle income trap. Even China is still more or less on the border. So that is the key, that she dodged that question. But let's look at Barkha Dutt's question. Barkha Dutt asked a fundamental question about the Indian economy, which is, India has growth rates. Yes, it's growing at 7%. It's become the 5th biggest economy in the past 2 or 3 years, and now it's about to become the 3rd biggest economy in 2 or 3 years. Fantastic. But why is there no job creation?
But the big challenge, along with these very sunny, optimistic, robust growth numbers, is that of employment. Now, you have said that India would need to create anywhere between 60 million to 148 Am I saying it
Yeah.
right? 148 million jobs before 2030. The economic survey talks about needing about 8 million every year, 8 million additional jobs. Your number would peg it at anywhere between 10 million to 24 million every year before 2030. What worries you about not just unemployment, but underemployment, which doesn't get talked about enough?
Yeah. So firstly, in terms of the size of the economy,
Yeah.
I think it's important, as you also point out, which is what brings up living standards is per capita income.
Yeah.
And of course, that is a bigger challenge. And the Prime Minister has talked about Viksit Bharat 2047 as a goal. But that's where we really want to see the action is in terms of per capita income rising. The job situation in India, India actually is, if you look at among its G20 peers, India is a country where growth, if you look at the last decade, about 6.6% growth. But if you look at employment growth, it's been under 2%. So it's been a lot more capital intensive growth than in several of its peers. And so it comes down to the question of how to change that and how to create a whole lot more jobs. There is, this debate that is going around about which sectors can we stimulate and which, should it be manufacturing? Should it be services? What should it be? Frankly, if you want to create an additional 60 to 148 million jobs, you really do need broad-based growth in all the sectors.
And remember, the quality of life is not measured from the size of the GDP. If the country's population grows and India remains just as rich or just as poor as it is today, then it will become the third biggest. If India doubles, triples its population, then it will become the second or the first biggest economy. But the quality of life of people, will that be at the level of the developed nations? That is measured through GDP per capita, and nobody in India wants to talk about it. They try to hide behind PPP, etc. But that PPP is only for domestic issues. If you're eating idli vada made in India, fine, PPP counts. It's cheaper than idli vada here in the US. But if you're buying iPhones, if you're buying laptops, if you're sending your children abroad to study, if you're traveling internationally, if you're buying importing stuff in order to manufacture, if you're buying electric cars, all of that, the prices of that are global. They are not going to reduce and give you a cheaper iPhone because your PPP adjustment. So the real GDP per capita is critical to determining the quality of life. So Barka Dutt asks her this straight up question and says, look, India's economy is growing, but why are there no jobs? And that remains a big challenge to India. She does not talk about it. The reason for that is there are no private investments. And even the FDIs, which are coming from India, I'll talk about that a little bit, but there's no private investments. There's no growth in manufacturing. India has to grow in every sector, in agriculture, in manufacturing, in services. And the quality of education has to improve significantly. People have to be more productive. The reason why the per capita income is low is because the productivity is low. So I was surprised as to why she was dodging and not answering these questions. But nevertheless, to Barkhada, at least she says it very clearly that yes, India needs to generate 60 to 148 million, 6 crores to 14.8 crore new jobs by 2030, which means that India has to generate over 10 million jobs per year to go to the lower benchmark of 60 million, or generate 24 million jobs, 2.4 crore jobs per year to reach the higher benchmark by 2030. And that's going to be very, very challenging. This is a tough challenge. And that is where she's dodging the question, will India become a developed economy by 2047? It's not very clear. So I did some math and I realized that when India reaches and becomes the third biggest economy, its per capita GDP will be about 3.5 or slightly less than that, $3,500, which is not even upper middle income. So yes, it could be the third biggest economy in the world, but it will not be an upper middle income. It will still remain in the same category as it is now, which is a lower middle income. So there's no talk of how will we raise the per capita income of India from 2,700 that it is around right now to at least 4,700 in the next 3 to 4 years, so that India becomes an upper middle income economy. There were certain other developments which I was surprised that neither Barkha Dutt nor Rahul Kanwal asked, and I will share that with you. So the first thing is that India's strategy is to really emphasize on domestic manufacturing, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and so on. So, but for that you need investments. And there is no private investments really increasing India. So you're looking for foreign direct investments. And unfortunately, in the last 1 year, foreign direct investment flows have gone down. So that is a challenge. And Dr. Sitaraman acknowledged that in her budget speech, saying it is because of geopolitics that foreign direct investments have gone down. I don't know what she means by geopolitics. India is actually benefiting from geopolitics. Because of geopolitics, people are looking to diversify the supply chain and move away from China to other countries. So India is benefiting from geopolitics, but Sitaraman says that it is because of geopolitics that foreign direct investment has reduced in India. I wish someone would explain that to me as to how that is happening. And the second thing that she talks about is basically the cost. Borrowing costs have gone up. The borrowing cost for India has gone up. See, not many people talk about it. When India gets bad reputation internationally, for various reasons, and I'm sure you guys don't want to talk, you will suddenly say I'm anti-national, etc. Whatever it is, if people are worried about domestic stability and harmony in India, the cost of borrowing money from outside into India increases. And the moment that increases, the cost of foreign direct investment increases, and so it will reduce. In fact, the biggest foreign direct investor in India is Mauritius, and I'm suspecting that they are basically Indians rerouting their money through Mauritius. So Adani and Ambani are sending their money abroad, then sending it back to India to invest in India and in their own companies, and basically taking unfair advantages of tax concessions which are given to foreign investors. But if you look at India's trade data, this is trade data for the current 23 to 24 years, 23 to 24. And if you compare that to the previous year, if you notice, the merchandise exports of India have gone down. And so in 2022-2023 fiscal year, it was 451 billion. And this year it was 437 billion. So down by about $14-15 billion, a little more than $14 billion. And the imports have also gone down significantly by more than $70 billion. But services exports have gone up by $14 billion, roughly the amount that India lost in merchandise export, India gained in service exports, and service imports have also gone down. What is interesting is that the balance of trade has improved for India, but if you actually look at overall trade, it remains static. So India's exports were at 776.4 last year, and this year it was 76.68. Not any significant growth at all. It's clearly stagnant. And if you factor in inflation, it is actually less than last time. The imports have gone down, and that is not necessarily a good thing, which means that the raw materials that India might be importing are not being imported, which means that they are not contributing for manufacturing. If the imports have gone down in luxury goods consumption, which means also bad thing, then that means that people are not feeling confident. So instead of buying the BMW this year, they're postponing it to next year. So Gita Gopinath does not talk about these things as to how foreign direct, even though India is growing, if India is such a shining example of economic growth, then why aren't people attracted, and why in foreign direct investment rushing to India, and why is India's exports not rising proportionately? So those few things are a bit complicated. I think the thing is that the capital investments that India is doing in infrastructure, building roads, building airports, building other things, that is the main driver of GDP. So India is still following the strategy of a low-income economy, which is to grow through investments. So that is one of the few challenges that I think that India is facing. So yes, Geeta Gopinath is excited. She's trying to generate excitement at the speed at which India's GDP is growing, but she is dodging the tough question. She did not answer whether India will become a developed economy by 2047. She did not also answer the question whether India will be able to escape the middle income trap. I think 2047 is so far away. It's a quarter century away. A lot can happen. If you were looking at the data, if you look at Japan, for example, Japan's GDP has declined. Japan 15 years ago was an amazing economy. Now it is not. So we can't predict what's going to happen 10 years from now, the geopolitics, the pandemics, etc. So, but nevertheless, right now there is enthusiasm, and that is a good thing. And I hope that that this strategy of trying to make structural reforms continuously in order to generate innovation is something that really percolates down, not just from the federal government, but also state governments and small governments. She did emphasize that India has to improve its business environment. She didn't say directly that one of the reasons why foreign direct investments are down is because India's business environment, though the ranking is going up, is still not very hospitable. So she does say that India has to continuously improve the business environment to attract more foreign investments. So anyway, it is interesting to listen to Geeta Gopinath. She's absolutely a brilliant economist. And she's also a great communicator. So do watch both of those interviews, the one on India Today with Rahul Kanwal and the one on Mojo with Barkha Dutt. She also talks about the importance of providing, I mean, in the context of the murder in West Bengal of a young trainee doctor, she does talk about how it's very important that India provide safety and security. That's the basic for women, so that they can be in the labor force and they can contribute to economic development. Right now, only 25% of women are actually in the labor force, around 26%, and that is really very low. In developed economies, that number is much, much more higher. So I hope you found this conversation interesting, thought-provoking. So please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and share this video with a lot of people. Take care. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan.